because the person got into the situation anyway by this either or separation, black and white kind of a and or kind of position, and we're getting back into the integration, the bringing together, the embracing with that which was rejected. It's like the prodigal son, or bringing back the neglected element. And the reason, too, that there's sometimes that a feminist perspective is put on this is because in a patriarchal society, a lot of the receptivity, the going with the flow, and other aspects of being are rejected in favor of power, control, predictability, being in charge, being on top of. All of those qualities are brought to the forefront, and the qualities of being able to understand, connect with, embrace, be one with, and so on are being suppressed. This whole approach to healing reverses that and emphasizes the acceptance, the joining up with, the being present for, and the word that's often used is container or vessel, where you can sit and hold the person, hold the pain, which means be with it, not operate on it, not try to change it, just be with it. These are characteristics that are the flip side of control, power, and dominion. So sometimes this spiritual approach to healing is discussed or looked at from using feminist terms because of those characteristics of it. Okay.
Well now, I presented a lot of concepts in that lecture. I'd like to go over them with you bit by bit to review some of the ideas that were discussed, because these principles will come up as you're practicing the various techniques and methods of being with somebody in a healing way. So let's look now at some of these concepts that were presented. The first principle of spiritual counseling, I believe, could be expressed in the simple statement, love has no need for power. This has many levels of meaning. I first had this statement come to me spontaneously when I was sitting in meditation, when I was contemplating the meaning of my alcoholism and what I had learned from it. That there is a tendency to want to strive, to try to conquer, to try to be better than. And in some way, the lesson is about releasing, surrendering to something greater, a higher power, which is love. Another way of looking at this is that if we're going to be involved in a spiritual form of counseling, of healing, then perhaps it's not our own efforts that's accomplishing the healing, but it's a greater power, it's spirit, it's love, it's something of a transcendent nature that is happening in the healing situation. Another meaning of this is then that we do not bring power to the healing encounter, but we bring love. And by bringing love, by sitting there in love, then we have no need for any powerful techniques. If we do use powerful techniques, then they are being used in a loving way, recognizing that the techniques that we are using are but channels or vessels in which the power of spirit can more readily express itself. The second principle can be expressed in the term homeopathy, the suffering of self, which is to say that everything has a purpose, everything has a meaning. The homeopathic principle is that the illness comes up as a compensation for a purpose. The illness heals. We saw in the talk about looking at the process of the evolution of consciousness, the creation of souls, that story of the journey in which we try to become, as is our destiny and is our purpose, a individual perspective, an individual experience. And it seems like part of that process is that we have to really push our way out, really express ourselves in some way, and very naturally we tend to overdo it. This seems to be in the nature of things. And then the illness comes in, the suffering, to try to restore us to balance. The suffering is bringing us back like a rubber band stretching. And we're having to find that balance. So in the course of being with a person in a healing way, we then have compassion for their suffering because we realize that this is what they must experience in their path towards wholeness. Now, some people will say that it's not necessary to suffer in order to grow. And we'll keep an open mind about this because things are always changing. Consciousness, as it evolves, finds new ways of expressing. And so that just because for the last few thousands of years there's been this accumulated wisdom that no pain, no gain, doesn't mean that we might be getting to achieve a place where we can learn through joy, learn through pleasure. Some people talk about the difference between karma and grace. And perhaps we can explore some of that. But at the same time, to telling a person or coming at a person with the attitude, there's no need for the suffering, is like saying you have no need for correction. And yet at the same time, this suffering that they're having is an expression of some need. So we want to have a compassionate attitude toward that. Now, we want to take into account at the same time that many people who've had experiences of cosmic consciousness have reported that in those moments they would just sit back and marvel at everything and how perfect everything, including people suffering, everything was working out as it was meant to be. So that would mean, and some had responded to this, saying that that included wars, suffering, illness, all of these things were all part of some kind of a plan. Later, when they would come out of this cosmic consciousness experience, they could not imagine how they could have thought such thoughts, but they remember that back then they did have that feeling. So we have to be sympathetic and open to the mystery that's contained in the experience of the suffering, of the illness, if you will. A third principle, and it relates to homeopathy or the suffering of self, is that what the person is encountering is self. That the illness in some way is like holding up a mirror to the person. And if we are to aid in the messenger, the God within the illness, if we are to be an aid to the gods in our role as therapist, then we too must be holding up a mirror to the person. We must allow our presence to help that person find themselves in their suffering. This is very important, and it works in many ways. First of all, we bring this understanding to the situation. This can come about through experiences that we've had ourselves, as I described some of my own experiences. This is brought about by an attitude that we have when we're working with a person, that somehow they are going to find themselves in this suffering, in this illness. It also comes about through the different ways in which we have the person be with their suffering, that they can like look in a mirror and experience their pain, look in a mirror and ask their pain, what are you showing me? What do I see of myself in you? When we tune in at the various levels and use our powers of empathy, our powers of compassion, this type of receptivity, and can be with the person like a mirror that says, look, as I'm with you, this is what I experience. What are you experiencing? Let's live this fully. Let's listen to it, and it will teach us, it will guide us. That this is a very powerful process of being the mirror, of helping them find the mirror for themselves within their own process, within their own suffering.